All right, we're back. We are COMP1073, that's client-side scripting, Georgian College in the winter 2017 semester, and we're week 6, part 1 of our broadcast. We're going to have somebody with the shopping cart go by. What it is, right? All right, so up until now, we've been doing inputs and outputs, basic stuff. A little bit with a new topic. What we're going to cover today is something called Ajax, right? So this is something new with JavaScript. Our code for today, right? So Ajax is the topic. I have put a PowerPoint up online for you. I will follow the PowerPoint. You know, there's a lot of pages here, but I need to go through it because every part of it is quite complex. About what it is when we talk about Ajax. We talked about events, like the whole event model. You guys should have a fairly high-level idea of how it works. I don't expect you guys to know exactly how events work because it's a complex topic as well. It was given to you early on, and you know how to do basic buttons by now, I'm hoping, and those kind of things. That's fine, but when it comes to more advanced features, for example, here we're using Ajax, then complex. So for this session today, we're going to use a new document. So we're going to just do a new project here. So I'm just going to seen this a bunch of times, so I'll just do this really quickly. And it's good practice to do it on your own if you want. But what I'm going to do here is to repository. And then what I'll do is at the break, or after the break, we'll talk about the exam, or midterm test is like what we should call it, which is what it's going to be for next week. Because we're in week 6, yeah? So next week is week 7, and then we have a break. We have midterm break, and then we come back with more advanced stuff. I'm just going to change some of these things that we've talked about before. So our bar.json, I'm going to change this to say lesson 6. Okay. 6. So these just minor changes here. So if I'm in our bar.json, I'm not going to change my contact pages or anything like that. My README is going to say lesson 6, like intro to or working with Ajax, which we're doing today. Communicating with the server. So I'm just going to, instead of copying, I'm typing it. There we go. So communicating with the server for Ajax. Okay, and file, and I have a web config file we've been using to connect with Azure. Right, we're going to leave that alone right now. We're ready to go and put this up on the web. So I'm going to do a git. I'm actually going to use the tools built into Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to go initialize git repository here and add all these files into my staging area and do an initial commit. These are things you should know by now how to do. Clear about GitHub and Git. Required to use Git and GitHub on your exam. All right. You will be required to put things up on either Azure or some other kind of live site. So if you don't know how to do those things, because it will happen next week, it'll be a portion of your mark. It won't be a large part of your mark, but there will be a portion of it that will be dedicated to that. And just on that, that means that when we talk about your exam, I'm just going to put up a new GitHub repo here. Remember that you always start off with the low-hanging fruit kind of thing. The stuff, I know it's kind of a bad cliche. What I mean is the easy stuff. Do the easy stuff first. That's a bunch of marks, right? So you do a bunch of the easy stuff first, you get it all done. You know, you get the hardest stuff for last. If you do the hardest stuff first, the challenge or the risk is time to get the easy stuff done. which is worth a lot of easy marks, right? So a lot of quick marks. So that's why I'm saying, please, do whatever you can to follow what I'm telling you. Every semester, this one, for whatever reason, they try and do the hard stuff first, or they try and do bonus mark stuff. It has no bearing on the actual requirements of what I'm asking you to do. And then they get disappointed when they're like, well, why, how come I didn't do so good? Well, you didn't do good because you didn't do well because you didn't really listen to what I asked you to do, right? And if you hit those core requirements, I'm just going to shut this one down for now. So an example would be you're asked to build something, instructions, and let's say I have 3 sets of instructions, A, B, and C. A is kind of an easy thing to do, B is a little bit harder, and C is probably going to take most of your time. You might have some ancillary stuff that I'm asking you to do as well, like for example, your internal documentation, your GitHub, set up on Azure or another server or whatever. I would do is create my project structure. I'm going to probably give you, I'm telling you right now in advance, a project to work with. You will not be making your own structure up, work from, right? You're going to have to create or rename the project something like whatever the project name is, COMP1073-midterm to COMP1073-midterm, and then your student ID attached to it, something like that, okay? And you're going to have to do that. Then, once you get the project, you're going to add your name to it and put it up on GitHub. That's the next thing you should do. Make a GitHub repository, put it up on GitHub. After that, put it up on Azure or some other site that you're going to use for hosting. All right, whatever site you're using for hosting up until now. Step 2. That way, if you did that, you would get 2 points for GitHub, plus 4 points for hosting. That's 6 points, plus maybe a couple more points right there for some basic internal documentation of your name, and your student number and all that kind of stuff that you're going to cut and paste. And there you go. You have some basic things done. You have some of the marks, right? And then you're probably, I'm going to tell you, if A is the easiest instruction, do A first. Get A out of the way, right? Then do B, and then do C. If there's time, and if you want to add some additional features, and if I give you an option, I may, every semester I do slightly different things. There might be some minor thing I've asked you to do, then do that, right? But at the end of the day, please try not to panic or, have a problem with the exam. It's not going to be outside of what you've already done, right? So don't think that I'm going to try and surprise you with some other additional material, or it's not about that. You will have access to your code. You will have access to Google. You will have access to everything. It doesn't really matter. If you don't know how to do stuff, right? So, keep that in mind. So you'll have access to your computer. You can use your computer, of course. But it will be a timed exercise. I may not give you the entire period because, for example, we may have to depart or start uploading around, 20 minutes to the end of our session, because if everyone uploading on Blackboard at the same time caused a bit of a slowdown, and then we may run the risk of the other class coming in, and that would be, kind of disastrous. Mind when we talk about, how to organize yourself on the exam. Okay, so that's really just a little high-level stuff about the exam itself. Let's go back to this now. So I've kind of put everything up on GitHub, if you noticed. So here we've got a GitHub repo called Lesson 6, COMP1073, W2017, up on Georgian College. That's where it is, with the server with Ajax. That's what it's all about. So what is Ajax and all that kind of stuff? A little bit of a history of Ajax, called asynchronous JavaScript and XML. That's where it came from. Nowadays, we don't really call it that anymore, right? We just call it Ajax. That's what, that's what we're going to be talking about. This is the difficult way of doing things. I have to be honest with you. Ajax today is going to be without jQuery. And I'll tell you right now, 90% of the time that I use Ajax, I always use jQuery because it makes it easier. But we have to learn about the basics of Ajax, and that's why we're doing this session, okay? All right, so again, you have we're going to use a JSON file, and we're going to talk about JSON, JavaScript object notation, what that is, how to create a JSON file, and where to get information for the JSON file. What is JSON? Some people say they call it JSON or JSON, right? It's perfectly fine to call it that. It's just having a data, a bunch of data stored inside of a file that looks very JavaScript-like, and we'll talk about what that is. So we have to talk about what JSON in a second. So again, a little bit of history. Back in the day, I'm going to say it like this: we were looking at ways of and updating parts of our page without reloading the page or accessing the server. Because making round trips to the server, whenever we access a page, if you know anything about the internet, a little bit, an internet protocol, when we access a page, we're actually sending a request to the server. Request as a response, we get a response back from the server, and that trip out to the server with a request and back is called a round trip. To and from the server, over and over again. And every time we do that, make a round trip, it takes time. So back in the day, things were a little bit slower. The internet wasn't quite as fast. Browsers weren't as advanced. And so we thought about ways, to make things quicker, to reload parts of the page while keeping the other part the same. So less loading, exact same area means a little bit, quicker response times for the stuff that we were doing. We kind of created something called an XML HTTP request, right? Now this was initially brought to forward by Microsoft. Actually, they came up with it, and Microsoft was using Internet Explorer 5 with ActiveX, and you needed to use ActiveX to do that. Now we're not going to care about Internet Explorer anymore or Edge. I want you to work on more modern browsers. If it doesn't work in Edge, doesn't matter. Edge is pretty good now, right? It's not like it's not like it used to be, like how IE was a couple of years ago. It's been completely reinvented. So ActiveX, again, mostly used by Microsoft. To some degree, it still is. I think mostly Microsoft has adapted the new protocols with XML HTTP requests. We're going to create, the first object we're going to create is an XHR object. Again, it's three letters. You're like, XHR, what the hell is that? XHR stands for XML HTTP request. That's what it stands for. Instead of that big long thing, we say XHR, right? And so what we're doing is we're making this request. We're creating an object server, and the server takes information, fills it into the object, and then we can take that object like a variable out of that object and put it into our page. That's the basic gist of it, okay? And we don't have to reload the page. We can tell JavaScript. Remember, we know how to inject. You know how to inject code or information into your JavaScript page and get information. You should be able to do that now, right? Making hooks into the page and all that kind of stuff. Well, with JavaScript, we're going to tell the server where we're going to inject the data for our page. We can do a variety of things with Ajax. All right, so again, the Ajax was coined by this guy, Jesse James Garrett, in 2005. So it wasn't that long ago. I mean, if you think about where we are right now, we're in 2017, 2005, 12 years ago. And when you think back, 12 years ago, not that long in terms of web, but it's hundreds of years when you think about how it really works out. If you look at web years, and every web year is approximately about 3 months, right? Then it's many, many years ago from a web perspective. It's like a dog's age, right? A long time from a web perspective. From a computer science perspective, well, a long time. But from the web moves fairly quickly, and so that's the problem. So again, Ajax can use XML, right? Text or HTML as a data source, and this is a key right here on this PowerPoint slide. So this is PowerPoint slide 8, right? What this means is data sources that can attach, attach to and draw from. Hey, if I can get stuff in HTML, that means that I can inject HTML from a file into my page. That I can create something called partial pages, right? Where I have my header of my document and the footer of my document, and I can use Ajax to inject my navigation bar and a bunch of other stuff into my page, right? So I can have the same navigation as opposed for me just duplicating, copying that navigation over and over again and modifying a bunch of stuff over and over again. Lots of redundant code that we normally do, like we've been doing so far. So that's what Ajax can allow us to do, as well as load data from files, XML files, which is a way of forming data, and JSON files, which is the most common way right now from and to servers, right? JSON, a JSON object. We'll talk about what that looks like. There's two types of communication that we can do with the server. We can do synchronous and asynchronous. Okay, what do you think synchronous means? If you think about what synchronous means, anybody? Synchronous communication. What was that? No, that's more asynchronous. Synchronous means you do things in order, once and then afterwards. You know, so you do one thing first, and then consecutively you do, or you do the next thing, right? Asynchronous means I might have multiple calls, and you don't know. There's no order for when it's going to happen. It's running in another event queue altogether. So you have an event loop. JavaScript works on an event loop, and what you can do is you can. It's not random, but the call to the server might be happen at different times. It doesn't have to happen in order. Even if you write your procedures, your functions in a specific order, they may trigger at different times, even though you've written them in a specific way. So that's what asynchronous does. And we have this because we use asynchronous JavaScript to connect with the server, so that way we don't have to wait for it to load. Now this can cause issues. One of the challenges with Ajax, right? Because again, how often we can say synchronous Ajax? Almost never. We never use synchronous Ajax. That's why it's called asynchronous JavaScript, right? And the A and J used to stand for that, asynchronous JavaScript, right? But basically what this does is synchronous blocks any kind of future until this call is completed, right? It doesn't allow anything else to happen as long as it's doing its job. And you might say, well, that makes sense, right? If I want to load a part of a page, I don't want something else to interrupt me from loading the page. It's worse, and it actually makes it really, really slow. So we got to kind of wait for, and this is 99 times out of 100, we'll see an asynchronous Ajax call, right? Something that's not something in line, right? So what I want to do with the page is do this. Hey, am I finished loading? I got to check to see if whatever I'm loading from the file, from the data, is done, right? If I didn't do this and I waited for the data file to load, I could block my entire operation of my page. My page would just sit there at all, right, until the data finishes loading. However, with asynchronous Ajax, that kind of methodology, you can do other things, keep working while your data is loading into the page, right? We mostly use this method. So it says, asynchronous calls can happen at any point, or a focus or a blur or some kind of touch. That's where they all can happen. Just to reiterate here, what it says here, it removes the blocking nature of synchronous calls because we don't want to use blocking JavaScript. Blocking JavaScript or any kind of code like that, what it means is that you have to wait until something else happens. And no one likes to wait these days. You go to a page, like I told you guys before, maybe, and you wait for 3 seconds, and you're like, okay, wait a minute, it's 3 seconds. What's going on? 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds? You're like, okay, something's broken, right? Nowadays, we don't have 6 seconds to wait on a page. Something's broken if it doesn't come up in 1 second, right? Go back 20 years before where we are now, for it to load for half a minute, right? 30 seconds for it to load, and that would be like an average time. Now it's like 1 second, and it's too long. So, this kind of stuff is why we want to use asynchronous calls. So like we said, we're going to create this thing called an XHTTP request. And we're going to use this syntax. So we're going to say var xhr is equal to new XML HTTP request. It's going to be an object. Now, remember we talked briefly about objects. Objects are not just variables. They're loaded with information. They might have, right? An example. If I was to go to our page here. Here's our page. And let me just get into, by the way, see what this is? See what you're seeing here with my bower.json? This is what JSON looks like, yeah? This is what it looks like. Let's go into one of the pages, right? So an example would be, we have our index page, right now. If I was to run this, let's actually run this thing and see how it works. So I'm going to go light so far. So let's see what we got so far. We got this, right? And when we go to our projects page, and we got this. And remember, we did a few special effects with some buttons here, events, last week, right? We did a contact page, which is fairly empty. It just has this contact form where we get some information from. I want to fool around with the home page and get rid of some of this stuff here. I want the home page to dynamically load my information from, that's what I want it to do. That's what I want to happen, right? So I don't want to store my file inside my JavaScript anymore. I want to store it in another file, which means you have to figure out how to load it. And then when it's done loading, it's going to display it on this page. So example would be a paragraph of text or paragraphs of text. I want it to display in here, right? And we can. All right, so that means that from a formatting perspective, if I go to my index.html, I have an area down here where I have some content. There's my content page. I want to kill all the stuff that's inside from about line 45, if you're following me. So I'm not going to have any of this stuff, not even the button. It's going to be gone. So now if I kind of save and go back, you can see that there's nothing on the page, right? And what I want to do is I want to create a list. So I'm going to kind of put this together for people who are with me on PHP. Some people are here are also taking the PHP course with me. You may find this familiar. One tag, and we're going to say a list of games, a list of games that I have, right? Now it's good practice for people who've never seen this before as well. I want you guys to understand what's happening, right? So here's my game list. There's no games right now. And I want to define my games list inside of a JavaScript that includes JavaScript object notation, okay? Just like this bower.json file is a good example, right? Notice that we have a couple things here. We have a name, that's the property. This is what a JSON file looks like, right? You also can have a name and an array, more than one author, an array of strings. That's what this is, right? And then you have a name, some kind of string with some kind of string value. And you can see that this is how this JSON file is created. You can even include additional objects inside of this file, like an array of objects or simple objects. How would we want to create our JSON file? So I'm going to make another file here. Our games.json, right? Here's our games list, right? And we have to always open up a JSON file with an open curly brace and a closing curly brace out of all JSON files. Number one, right? Number two, you must use double quotations inside your JSON file when it comes to properties. Please do not use single quotes. It will mess up, right? Different data types. You can have a string data type. You can have a Boolean. You can have a number. You can have a bunch of those things. And that means that I define my properties in this pair. It's called key value pairs. We have the key, which is the property, whatever that's called. An example of this is if I had just one game that I was describing, name, that's the property, and then the value would be after the colon, right? We would call it whatever the name is. For example, Fallout 4, right? That's the name of the game, right? So we have an object. Inside the object, we have one property called name of Fallout 4. Again, within this key, this is the key. Whenever you hear key value pairs, this is the key, this is the value, right? Key value pairs. Key value pair separated by colon. Okay, notice that there's no semicolon here. Colons inside your JSON file, right? That's not what we do. Script. It's JSON, right? It's a notation that is used to store data, right? Okay, maybe we want to have yes. Can one key have many values? Yeah, if it's got an array, if it's an array, right? It can be an array of whatever it is, and we're going to do that in a second. Comma, separating our properties, and then the next property that we want to put in here is something like, our cost. So what's the cost of the game? Now here, I'm not going to use a string. I can use like an actual number, $69.99. That's valid because that is a valid data type. And then I can make a rating, right? Here's a rating. where my rating is, as an example, again, a range of like 4.3. I'm just making this up, right? Object, one, game. Just talking about one game. I want many games. I want a list of games. A list. In my mind, when I say the word list, in your mind should be, I want an array of game objects. I want an array of games, right? Each game is this thing right here, right? I want an array of these things. So how do I make that into a JSON file? Properly formed, by the way. Well, each of these. Let me copy this for a second. This is no good. Because if I put these two together, notice that I get a little like a little underscore. Comma. There's two of them, right? But however, notice that I haven't wrapped these two things in anything. For example, I haven't wrapped these two things in the outer braces. Remember, if I want to put two objects inside these outer braces, I'm just going to copy this, copy them, and put them inside here. Even when I do this, I still got a problem. The problem is, what is this? Right? This is just two objects that are just sitting in space. There's no definition for these things. What I want to do is I want to separate these things inside of an array. The square brackets. Up here, red means theirs, right? And I got two objects, this one and I got this one, right? Fallout 4, and this is another one. We'll make another. We'll call this, again, I like using Overwatch as an example. It's $49.99 with a higher rating, something different. So you can see there's different data here. Yay. But there's a problem here, right? It's an array of objects. Yes, that's good. But the array doesn't have a name. I need to attach a name to the array. So this is the value. I'm giving something the value. This is the value. And these are values. This one here and this one here is the value. These are elements inside of my array, right? So if I want to make this work, it has to be something like this. Games. Oops. My games array would look like, by the way, you probably want to put this just from a proper notation perspective, right? And then I'm just going to kind of format this thing just so you see what it looks like. Now that's okay. So let's take a look at what this is doing. I'm saying, here's my JSON document. This is the document itself, the whole collection actually. This is the collection. Inside this collection, I have one object, one property. It's an array, right? Here's my array. Inside my array, I have two objects, right? It's an array. Games is an array. Here's the array syntax right here. Of objects, specifically game objects, because I have this game here and this game here. Notice that they follow the same syntax. Hey, question, do they have to follow the same syntax? Do I have to have the same schema that I'm using, name, cost, and rating, name, cost, and rating? Is it required? Well, not in JavaScript, right? But the problem is, if I want to load this stuff up somewhere, list or some kind of table, then I better try and organize myself. So you'll have errors. For example, if I'm looking for a rating, right? Then what's going to happen? I might get a 0 value or some other weird effect, right? So we always try and give this thing a schema of some sort. Okay, so there's a couple of them. Let me add one more just to make it more apparent what I'm doing here. So copy, paste. We'll give it another name. What's another name you guys are happy with? Any other kind of game? Anyone play games in this bloody room? You don't know?
I'll go with Horizon Zero Dawn.
Horizon Zero Dawn. All right, I like it. Horizon. All right. Is it like this? Cost? What's the approximate cost? $10.99. Must be a Steam game.
No, it's 16.
All right. And what do you think the rating is? Do you think you love it? Do you love this game? Is it good? It's nice even rate it, right? So let me just say it's worth for now it's worth a 4.1. We don't know. There you go. So we have 3 games. Notice that they all take the same shape, have the same shape, right? They all have name, cost, and rating as properties, right? This is JavaScript object notation, JSON. This is not JavaScript. This is just JSON, right? JSON stores data. That's what we're doing here. We're representing data in this way, okay? Now, what I want to do in my index, right, in my games list, I want to create, a table, right? And the table that I want to create is going to be based on, now I'm going to make a fixed table here. I'm going to have 3 games pop up, right? I could make it so that somehow it iterates, right? It kind of for us. And how we do that? We do it with JavaScript, right? We want to make so it loops for every game in games. For each game in games, hear how I'm solving up the problem? For each game in games, I want to inject or some kind of row. For us to make a row, we need to have a table structure, right? Here's our table structure, right? And remember how tables look. For people who don't remember or who don't know, you can always go to getbootstrap.com and to get some basic table components from a CSS perspective. We have some examples here of what the table would look like. That's what I want. So I want to have my name, my cost, and my rating. That's what I want to have here. It's going to be displayed for the stuff that we're going to do today so far. And what I want to do with my name, cost, and rating, that's what it's going to be, is I'm going to kind of color it with some CSS, different classes. But in order for me to get there, I need some idea, retreat schools, I need some idea of how to do, so there's HTML, right? For those people who forgot, remember that we have an outer table. We have an outer table element. Here it is. Now, please don't put any style elements. Like this is inline styling. It's terrible. We have table rows, right? This particular case is THs, which are table headers, right? TDs, which are table cells or columns inside the columns. This is the structure of your basic table. We only need a table header and table rows, but we only need one table row. Is going to be repeated. We're going to inject HTML in our page from our JavaScript. Okay? How do we do that? So let's grab this example. I'm just going to grab this whole thing for a second, copy it, go back to our code, and then let's just format the document so it looks nice. So I don't like ugly documents. We don't need this one. We don't need this table row. Right, the bottom one we don't need, right? And before I put any kind of actual data in here, I want to adjust the row with some mock data, some fake data. We have some fake data we're going to put in, right? So we're going to say our name for the game, right? The second header is the cost, our rating, right? So name, cost, and rating. And then inside the second TR, this is where we're going to inject everything, right in here, right? Right in here is where we're going to inject stuff, right? We're going to put Fallout 4, just to use that one. Hard code it. I don't know, 69.99, I think I put in there. And then a rating of 4.5, whatever. That's our data. Back to my page. It looks like this, kind of ugly, right? And we can use Bootstrap classes to make it nice. Let's try this out. Go back to Bootstrap. I noticed that I have a class of table in my table, so let's do that first. So table, let's get rid of this width stuff. With a class, oops. All right, so if I go right back to this, you can see that automatically it's starting to look better. Table with a class of table. All right. And then what I want to have in there is some of these rows rows, and maybe what I want to have is not just a class of table, but there's also other kinds of tables that they have in Bootstrap that they talk about. For example, a table with some striped rows like this to make it more easy to read. So the class, right? So again, I'm going to go here and go table dash striped, table dash bordered, border table, right? Table dash hover. If I hover over it, it moves around. Make sense? And if I go back, I see this, right? A nice, much nicer looking table now. JavaScript so far. This is all HTML, right? And Bootstrap, right? This is what it should look like. Here it is. What I want is for this piece here, this piece, to be injected. That's what I want. Inject this stuff, and I need a hook. I need a hook, a way of injecting tables somehow. Do that. Now, I need some kind of table structure for me to do this. Kind of span or div tag or something where I'm going to inject a row. And I'm going to inject as many rows as I need inside this div tag. Inject 5 rows. I'm going to do that. 10 rows, 10 rows. However many data, how much ever data I have, I want to inject. Okay. So far, so good. It looks pretty good. Let's see what there's other classes that I can use to make it look even nicer. Right? Table hover. Here's a condensed table. Right? So for different kinds of colors that you want to put in, if you really want to put in colors, we can make the table responsive so it can change shape when you move it back and forth, right? And so on. And lots of other things that we can do. For now, though, I'm fine with this. I'm totally fine. Let's check something out. What if I'm going to use a div tag for a second, and I'm going to surround my table row, and I do this. Am I allowed to put a div tag around my table row? An example here. Right, here it is. Can I do that? Is that going to affect the way my table looks? So I'm going to refresh. You can see that there's no effect, right? That's good, right? If I can put a div tag, I have a structure that I can inject stuff into. And the reason why is because I want to make more of them. To use one, I want to make as many table rows, that's what TR stands for, as I need for my data. As many rows as I need. By the way, guys, if you do it in this class, you're going to do it in PHP. You're going to do it in other classes that you take. System over and over again to inject data. Let's make up, so instead of using this table row like this, let's make up the JavaScript we need before we do JSON, Ajax. What's the JavaScript that we need to use to inject some dummy data, right? That's what I want to talk about. Again, if I go back to my app.css under scripts, right? App.js, I mean, that it has home. And I want to get rid of all this other stuff because I don't have any paragraphs anymore or anything like this, all this button stuff. So this is all going to be cleaned up here, all up until here, because my home page is changing now. So it's got all this, right? So this is what I got so far. The rest I'm leaving alone. I'm not touching projects. Just this section here for my home. I'm switching on document title, right? And inside here is where I want to have some stuff, right? Now, wouldn't it be nice if in some kind of structure, right, that I want to inject, right? Is there a way of kind of holding my data in place? Can I do this? Well, yeah, it is. In fact, I can almost copy my JSON verbatim into my file. So if I go back to my JSON file, right, I can't get these outer braces. That won't work for me, right? This outer brace stuff is not enough. So if I take all this, copy it, go back in here, go back into my code, which is in here. And what I want to do is not in my case, in this case, but I want to make it a global up here. And let's get rid of all this stuff. This is just not needed right now. I want to call this, I want to let data right, equal to this. Am I allowed to do that? Can I make data equal to all this? Is that allowable? Yeah, it is. I can use JSON data inside JavaScript. I've properly formed the JSON objects, right? Just like I did. And you know what? Visual Studio Code checked it for me. There's no errors here. Notice though, however, that because I'm making this whole thing to the data object, I need to put a semicolon at the end. That's the only difference. I haven't changed anything. I had to assign a name to this object, data. You notice here, its data is an array of type games. A game array. It's basically an array of different games, each game having a name, cost, and rating. Okay. Access each of these objects. And the way to check this would be, let's do a little console log, right? Just at the beginning, before we do anything. So I'm going to say console log, check this out and see if it works, right? We're going to say data dot games, right? And then inside games, you want game 0 dot name, right? Why is this? But I'm looking at the name of the game, and this will be the first game. So first game is equal to plus data. Hey, what's a nicer way to do this? What's the ES 2016 way? Concatenating. What could I do here instead? I use the backtick. Remember the backtick? Here's my backtick character. And I want to use the backtick. The backtick is underneath the escape key, right? And I want to do something like this. I want to kind of not put the plus sign in a curly brace that surrounds all this stuff, right? With a backtick again. And this basically says, hey, JavaScript, get the data games value and inject it next to first game. Now, why is it this way? Data.games 0.name. Why? Because data represents this whole thing, everything. Games represents the array, this part. So in my data object, I have a games array. That's what I have. In my games array, I have several elements. This is one of them, element 0, element 1, element 2. Element 0, so game 0, I want to get the name property of element 0, which would be this one. That's what I'm hoping to find, Fallout 4. Do you understand? You're going to get confused when we load this exact same way. We're using Ajax from the file, right? First, we need to do it this way. We need to understand JSON a little bit. Okay, so if this is true, we should get, is Fallout 4 kind of idea. And if I run it, and it's already running because I've just done anything, and if I inspect down here and go to my console, first game Fallout 4. So I'm getting that information right from my data, and it's injecting it right to console. Right? All I'm doing is reading that JSON object. I'm basically cascading down. I'm using my dot operator to go into the object and retrieve the data from each property that I want. Don't understand? This will be catastrophic for you going forward, right? Because it's not going to get any easier than this. Good. All right. So we know this is true. That's true. Now that I have some dummy data to play with, right? Before we use the file, right? Again, the same thing. I want to kind of target that div tag, which means targeting it. There's many ways to do it. I could do something like this. A div tag that's inside of some kind of table. There's only one so far that I have. It'll be that one, right? It'll return all div tags, but the easier way is to get element by ID. But we don't have an ID for the div tag, which means we have to inject one. Where the div tag is, right here, we're going to add an ID is equal to, and we're going to call this our data row. That's what we're going to call it. You can always call this template rows or whatever you want to call it, but data rows make sense. And now we're going to get rid of this. Look, right? This stuff is going to go, right? We're going to inject in there all the stuff we need, right? The TRs and TDs that we need, right? That's what we're going to do. We're going to inject those in there. Now, inside of my app, that first two things. One, get, right, my data rows, right, equal to document D, and we're going to get that data rows object. So in this now we have a reference, because this is an HTML element. We have a reference. We have made a hook, some way of connecting the user interface, right, with our backend JavaScript. That's what we're doing here, okay? Once we've connected it, now we can play with this data rows, right? An example would be the inner HTML is what we want to inject, right? But we want to do that inside of a for loop. Element inside of my games array loop. How do I do this? Well, I want to create a for each that kind of surrounds everything. So here's for each. For each basically says this: give me an array, and then give me the element that we're going to loop inside of. Well, my array name is called, simply enough, games. That's the array, right? So that's the array. So we're going to put data.games, right? What? For each game, this is what we've made now. This is something we're making. For each game in data.games, that's how you read this thing. For each game in data.games, whatever that's going to be, right? What do I want to do? Here's where I want to inject the data. I want to take my data rows, or HTML property, and equal it to backticks. Remember I talked about templates? This is where the beautiful thing about using ECMAScript 6 or ECMAScript 2015 backticks is, because I can organize the way I want and inject stuff without using pluses, right? And I can do multi-row or multi-line strings, which is what I want here, right? So we use the backtick character, right? This is the beginning of my stuff, right? Here's the end of it. Here's the end of the backtick. I'm going to inject what this thing is going to look like. And the great thing about using backtick characters is it allows me flexibility. An example would be something like this: TD, then something like TD, right? We're going to inject that inside of our backtick, right? And inside of our backtick, so we're going to do this a couple times, right? So we're going to have one table data, another one, and another one. We're also going to make this surrounded by a TR. Single time, we're going to have another table row, right? So here's my next table row. So the table row data is going to be inside here, right? And then what I want to do is I want to take the game that I'm looping through, each game, and I want to get the game name and the game price and inject it into each of one of these table data, right? So I'm going to do something like this, right? Name, right? Game.cost. Dot rating. So here, what I'm doing, just to annotate what I'm doing here, create a, for each game in data.games loop. That's what I'm doing. Loop through. Do this over and over again. Repeat. I'll put that, maybe that's a better way of saying it. Repeat, repeat. Right? And here what I'm doing is I'm saying inject a template row. That's what we're doing. The data rows div tag. That's what we're doing. Let's see if this works. It's a nice idea, Tom. If it works, if we don't try it, right? Well, so we got here. Oh man. Plus equals what? This? We can also make it equals, right? But I got a problem, right? Even if I say it or whatever, it's like I'm getting the last one. If I go back, okay, and it's coming up here, right? Not down here. What did I do wrong? Yeah.
We didn't do the table rows.
Well, table row, we opened another one. That causes a really weird, funky effect. Let's see how that works, right? Still, no, that's not the issue. What else? Yes. We want to add it. We're only taking the last one, but still we're getting in the wrong location. How come we're getting it up there? There, right? My div tag. It's in my div tag. I want to kind of target that place. I don't want to target that other place that I'm doing right now. How come? Right? Well, remember my page loaded. I've got my data rows. And if I go to my index.html, got my div tag right here. It's inside of my table row. So what's the problem? TRs, right? Hold on a second. Let's see what I'm actually getting. That's another thing. Let's inspect the page. So we're going to go to elements, and we're going to go to up here and see what we're getting. So our container, here's our container. Our main div. Inside my main div, I have a row. Inside my row, I have my game list. Inside that, I have something called data rows. Wait a minute. Data rows right here. What's going on? I mean, there's my data, but I want it inside here. Inside my table row. There's nothing in here. How come? How come it went there? Is there something I need to do differently? Yes. I asked that question. I said, is it allowed? And you guys, no one said anything, right? How about a span? Am I allowed to span? Something must be allowed inside here. Let's change this to a span. Remember, that's why I didn't target a div, right? Here's a span tag, right? Let's see if this works, right? So I change my span tag, go down. No, right? That's still the same thing. Even if I refresh, it's not going to go anywhere. This is the span tag. Here's my span tag, right? My body tag. If I go down, if I look through again, and if I look through and I inspect my div class, here's my class of column. And look, my span is above my table again. What the hell? What's wrong with me? How can I not do this? What do I really need to do? I want to inject a row after a row with JavaScript. Yes. Correct. The table is what I want to look at, right? The data table or my games table. I want to look at that. And what I want to do is I want to append a child to the data table, which is it's a table row. I want to keep appending a table row child. That's what I want to do, right? That might be something I want to do. So I don't want to do this. Data rows. Let's call this we'll make an ID, give it an ID. We'll put it anywhere we want. ID of my game list. So we know what it is. My game list table. I'm using tables so we know what it is, right? It's my game list table, so in code we know what to do. What we want to do is we want to append child to the table. Append means add to the bottom of, right? Every time. Let's do that. Notice there's nothing now because we changed everything. We're going to go back to code, and now instead of data rows, we're going to say list table. This is by ID, game list table. And this is something new we haven't done before, right? I don't want to do my data.inner HTML, data rows that HTML. I want to say something like this. Data rows isn't it anymore anyway. It's game list table. Okay, and it's another kind of command. We're just going to take these away for a second so you can see what it is. I'm going to keep the backtick there because the backtick is going to give me the power that I need. Game list table dot, and if I go append child, right? Here's append child. Up, it tells me what kind of child I can put in, right? I want to do this. I want to do this thing. This added in. Is it okay for me to put in all this stuff? inside there, can I put a literal like this? Take this. Can I come at the bottom and put it here like this? And would that do? Child to the bottom of the table. Append child, if you look at what it does, it actually adds a node as a child node. Remember, we talked about nodes inside the table itself. Let's see if it works. What happened? What did it do? So again, I saved it. Right, I'm saving it. And if I've got a table row here, and it's a nice idea we had. What it is, inspect. Right, here's my inspect. And let's go take a look at what we're doing again. We've got inside here, inside our div class, we've got our table, and we got a T body, we got a T row, and that's it. We got nothing else. Game list table. Got a record on my game list table. Did I make a mistake typing everything? Is my game list table of type game list table? Let's take a look. Game list table. It says right there we're targeting the right thing. Row. Here's my table body. We don't have a table body. How come it was added? How come we don't have a table body, right? So am I adding it in the right place? I'm trying to add it underneath my table body, yeah? Because my table body, child, that's the child, right? And underneath my table body, I got my table row. But table row is a child of the table body, T body, right? Recode. Go back to this. I didn't put it in, but what we should really do, right? Because you know that's going to be generated is T body. It's being generated anyway, right? T body, right? Game body, table body. I don't know. What would you do? We have to target this now, not this. This is just the table itself. Look for table body, and look for you know, an object like that. I can traverse down the line like that. But why? When I can target exactly what I want, which is right here. Put an ID that's equal to body, but we don't need this anymore. So that's not it. Why am I troubleshooting with you? You're going to have this problem. You're going to try and think it out, and you're going to sit there and go like, how come it's not working? It should. Got to think about what it's doing, right? What it's doing first. Game list body. Okay, good. Go back to code. It's not game list table. It's game list body. Just change the name so it's the same. Game list body. Game list body. Okay, cool. Yep, I know I can inject stuff. Here's my game list body. I've done this before. Game list body. That's what I want to do here, right? I want to append child. I want to append this TR, right? That's what I want to do. Cool. All right, cool. Well, okay, it's not working. Anybody have an idea? Let's take a look again. Here's my table. Here's my T body. And I got one TR. That's it. Anyone have a recommendation on injecting a TR? What are you doing? Did I say that this stuff here, and this is the really funky stuff here, did I say that this, that I'm appending is, what am I trying to append? Text. Can text go inside of a table body? It's being rejected. So what can I do? Is there some other kind of chaining event that I can do, you know, to change stuff? Is it possible? Is it like, can I do something like target certain things? There's last child, there's node name, value, right? Node value, right? There's parent element, previous node, place child, all kinds of other stuff here that you can see here, right? Full name, names, all the stuff that's inside of my thing. All these things here are just anything that looks like a little document like this, right? So how do we do it? Text content. Do inner HTML, right, of my append, I can't append child inner HTML. And if I did inner HTML my game list body, I could, but I'd have to do all the the heading as well. I'd have to inject the heading as well as everything else, right? So what's the solution? Anybody? Well, for this, you need to understand what append child does. You're trying to use some kind of a function. You go to your JavaScript definitions, and there's a bunch of things here that I'll show you. JavaScript statements, right? And what you really want to find here, not JavaScript JSON, but append child is what you want to see. If there's any kind of thing that says change stuff, there's the document object model. Here's a document. And notice I can do document.getElementById. Once I've done that, I have access to doing other things like append child. But look what I'm appending. I'm appending an element. This is not an element. I'm just appending stuff. It doesn't know what to do, right? Okay, so I need to append an element. Finding HTML objects. I'm creating document mode, document. Oh, look, document.getDocumentElement returns the HTML element. That's what it returns. How about if I want to create a document element? Right? Document title, document URL. These are all beautiful. Here's DOM elements. Finding HTML elements, I can do that. My element is document.getElementById. I can do that kind of stuff. And we did that. We kind of hooked into it, right? Document by tag name. Here's a form where we're injecting inner HTML of a particular document.getElementById, the inner HTML piece. I want to kind of do that, but I want to inject, I want to add in, I want to append child. So how do I create a DOM element? How do I create an element? Oh, this is going back to here, so I want to go to here and create, or HTML element JavaScript. Okay, you don't know how. Okay. Well, there he is, the DOM create element method. Yeah. Good, but let's do this for a second. Here's document, so I'm getting a button. And here I'm going to do my document.createElement, right? And it says create a button element, right? And this is what I want to try and do. I want to create an element called, is it going to be a TR, right? That's what it's going to be. And it's going to be stored inside the button in this different thing. So I want to use this document.createElement, all right? If I'm right, maybe I'm not, right? This TR is what I want to do. So I want to append childs, but I want to append an actual, I don't want to do this here. Nice idea again, right? It's not this that I want to do. First of all, I have an error in my code. Well, not just the dot, right? An error in my code, period. Like this is, I'm trying to append child this, and then I got this. Okay, so first of all, it should be like this, yeah? So it won't cause my stuff to run, will it? Because it's not an element. I'm just injecting some kind of text. That's what I'm doing with this. Create an element, and I want to append this. I want to use my inner HTML of that element to be in there. Do this here, right? So I want to do GameListBody dot before the bottom of my loop. I want to do something like this. I want to say GameListBody, right? Dot append child down here, and I want to put the child of the element, which is my new. We'll call this a new. That's what I want to do. I want to take that new row and inject it, right? And my new row is going to be this, right? So I'm going to say something like this inside the top. I'll fix this in a second. I want to go let new row is equal to document.createElement. I create touch list. Create and look at the elements I can create. Area, block quote, body, BR. How about a TR? Right? I want to create a new TR. Right? That's the element that I want to put in there. And just for testing sakes, right? I don't want to do this. I just want to call this let some string for now, just so it doesn't error out, is equal to this, right? Some kind of string, right? But what I want to do is instead of take this new row and I want to inject a TR, right? Let's see what it does just by doing this. It's not going to include my data. Just the TR is going to be injected. Does it do that part first? Go back and refresh my table. That's the first piece I need. Hold on. My table body. Hey, I got 3 TRs. That's a good sign. So I actually injected my data now. Look, there's 1, 2, 3 table rows, right? Each table row to have its own table data. ML. That I can do, right? We know how to do that. Take this away. Now I want to do this. I want to say, well, new row, inner HTML, this stuff, right? Do I get it? Did I get the list? Did it happen for me finally? Oof, right? Does anyone not understand what I had to do? I'm pointing it out because sometimes, you know, it seems easy from the get-go, but then once you start thinking about what I'm trying to do, how I'm going to manipulate my DOM, we're doing more advanced DOM manipulation today, and as well as AJAX, but I can't do one without the other because how can I show you how to inject stuff into a table without knowing how to make a table? I don't like a couple things. I don't like the fact that my cost and my rating are left center aligned, right? And this requires me to put in for each of my table data rows, my cell here and my cell here, and I'm going to put a class of text center, right? Not centered. But if I did that there, class of text center on these ones, right? So that means out in my document, in my index.html, these cost and rating, I want to put class is equal to text center. With my name because I like it left centered, left aligned. So, enter. Looking better, would you say? So I know I've got the way to inject my stuff now of getting this stuff, this XHR request going. But we're going to do that after the break. Let's take 5 or 10 minutes, go to the washroom, try and understand what I'm doing, put this up on GitHub for you as well. And we're going to get to the next step.